Some danger doesn't announce itself. It settles in gently, wearing the shape of care. It learns what makes you feel safe, the warmth of a room, the ease of routine, the comfort of being chosen, and then slowly reshapes those things around you. Trust bends in small, almost invisible ways, folding in on itself until control and threat become difficult to tell apart. What once felt like shelter began to tighten, not all at once, but gradually, using what it knows about you to hold you still, long after the rooms are empty and the lights go out. The body remembers that quiet confusion, the moment safety stopped meaning what it once did. Welcome to What Would They Say? Before we start, I want to give you a gentle heads up that this episode contains discussions of sexual assault, grooming, and abuse. We approach this conversation with care, but we understand that it still may be distressing for some listeners. If you're listening to this and it's bringing up things for you, it's okay to pause, to look after yourself, to take a break and come back when you're ready, or skip this one altogether. Your well-being comes first. If you feel like you may need support in Australia, that is free and available through 1800-RESPECT on 1800-737-732 or Lifeline on 13 11 14. If you are outside of Australia, you can find support services in your country via the No More Global Directory at nomoredirectory.org.
The focus of a groomer as they learn about you is relentless. He had money and he had status. You know, children should have safe adults that they feel they can talk to. That's really important. You just don't have the playbook for arguing that, or, you know, we had no sense that we were allowed to decide what happened to our body.
Today, I'm recording from Awabakal land, and I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this country, their ongoing connection to land, waters, and community, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I'm joined today by Kat Mackay, all the way from the south of Scotland. Kat is our first international guest, a dear friend, has a very funny accent, and is someone I'm deeply grateful to be sharing this space with. They've generously agreed to bring their insight, care, and wisdom to a topic I honestly don't think I could approach with the same depth or integrity without their support, and I'm incredibly thankful they're here with us today. Kat is a sexual assault survivors advocate, equestrian coach, the founder of Willow Birch Supportive Coaching. They also offer mindfulness and meditation practices supporting people to reconnect with safety, presence, and self-trust. They are a poet, the author of Twisted Musings of a Darkened Mind. But more than any title, Kat is someone who speaks with rare clarity about experiences many of us live with quietly, often for decades. Kat joins us today following our previous episode to offer context, not from theory or headlines, but from lived experience. They're here to help us better understand the invasive, far-reaching impacts of sexual assault and grooming, how these experiences don't exist in a single moment, but ripple outward into identity, safety, relationships, and the body itself. This conversation isn't about shock or detail. It's about truth. It's about how grooming can look subtle, ordinary, even caring, and how power, trust, and silence can be weaponized over time. Kat shares their story not because it's easy, but because it helps illuminate what survivors are so often expected to carry alone. We're deeply grateful for Kat for trusting us with their voice and their story. This is a conversation held with care and one that we ask you guys to meet with gentleness for both Kat and for yourselves. Welcome, Kat. Thank you for coming and having this conversation with me today. I acknowledge that it was a big ask.
It's really special to have the story held with care. It's not something that you find in many spaces.
I'm hoping that you feel that way when we finish it today, and I hope people who are listening that may have found themselves in a similar situation feel like we've done it justice as well. So to start us off, Kat, I think maybe we head back to your childhood. Tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up for you.
So we lived in a very small place. There weren't a lot of children, and the school was very small. We were bullied all through school from the age of 5 till about 16. And then it became less kind of frequent as some people left school and we split into smaller and more specialised classes. It was lonely. There was a lot of freedom. We were we always say we were quite feral. You know, we just leave the house in the morning and we could be 10 miles away, just wandering around in nature. And then we'd come back for tea. It was, you know, we were always different. We had our little autistic obsessions and we were into like wildlife and birds, and most 5-year-olds aren't. We could also read before we went to school, so that kind of set us apart and yeah, sort of made us a target.
As an adult now, that sounds pretty idyllic, apart from the loneliness and bullying part, but just being able to be free in nature. Like, if I could choose that for myself now, that's definitely what it'd be.
Yeah, I mean it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful place, and you know, we didn't object to the alone time. You know, we quite enjoyed it, but it also set us apart. You know, other people would be playing together and we would be sat in a tree with our Fisher Price little cassette player listening to a book, and sometimes also reading a book at the same time, which apparently most people don't do. Yeah, it was just weird. A lot happened. You know, we've been suicidal since we were about 7 and felt pretty worthless. We had, going to sort of the time that we're going to be talking about, we had just lost a mentor and a mother figure when our 2 mentors fell out with each other. Although looking back, that was also very manipulated, as we know we were told lies about our previous mentor and that they didn't care about us. And she was also told lies about things that we had said that weren't true.
So there was definitely cultivation of your environment and the people that you had access to happening in the background.
Yeah, I think at that time we just felt very alone and that everyone hated us and no one understood us. We desperately needed to be seen, and it was around that time that we wrote the first poem that is included in the book.
Before we go forward into what happened next, what did you need most at that time in your life?
We needed to be seen and to feel safe. And we hadn't felt safe for a very long time.
So, without going into specifics around it, had you learned anything early on about staying quiet, keeping adults comfortable, or pushing down your own discomfort?
Yes, is the short answer. Our early life taught us not to share anything outside of the projection that adults had of us, because if our feelings or experiences didn't match their expectations, we were rejected, ridiculed, or disbelieved. It felt like constantly trying to find the right version of ourselves to be accepted and never getting it right because the goalposts change all the time. And then the bullying reinforced that need to freeze, knowing that no one would do anything, and that if we fought back, then we would be punished, both at school and at home. Our pain felt inconvenient. We'd experienced sexual abuse from a very young age, so we already felt that we were a thing to be used by others. And in fact, we felt defective for not enjoying the things we were told we should. And that initial awareness of like an inside me and an outside me comes from very young. And just the feeling that we should not have the feelings that we did, and that how we truly felt was never safe to express in the real world.
I'm going to ask you some questions to lead the listeners into what comes next for you. But before we do that, I think that sitting with what you've just shared is really important as we move forward, because there's almost a preconditioning that occurred there for you. And for somebody listening who has held this experience, they will understand that without doubt. But for somebody who may have never, or who doesn't know somebody who has, what comes next might feel for them like there'll be questions like, well, why? Why did that happen? So I just really want, as we're moving forward, for people to hold what you've just shared and understand when safety is offered, how alluring that is to somebody who has never felt it before. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the woman who came into your life as a teenager?
So she came into our life as a coach, although that relationship quickly became more all encompassing. There was that one adult in our life, the previous mentor, who had cared for us and supported us emotionally. And the second coach came into our life when that mentor was going through her own trauma and didn't have the emotional bandwidth to support us anymore. So we were very adrift at that time, and kind of perfect for this sort of thing. She took us on trips for long drives, gave us lifts home, and confided in us. At the time, she did represent a mother figure, which was a role she encouraged by distancing us from our parents and that mentor, and taking an interest in whether we were doing our homework, buying us clothes, and allowing us to choose how to decorate the spare room at her house, which she referred to as our room. We were at her house every day, and even when she was working, we would be at her side typing emails and documents, laminating and folding leaflets. Although the focus was almost exclusively on her needs and activities, it meant that we felt included and valued because we were such a constant part of her life.
What did it feel like for you to spend so much time in her space, like having that warmth and compassion and freedom and that sense of being chosen or trusted?
And it felt like being valued. She taught us to bake and arrange flowers, and how to slow cook in a crock pot, and how to dress a crab, and all those finishing school kind of things. We hosted dinner parties together. And when we started house sitting every other week from Thursday to Monday, it also felt like being trusted and needed. Those feelings were incredibly seductive. When we were at the house alone, we were given money and had the freedom of a warm house, which after growing up in poverty was a big deal, and Sky TV. To a teenager, that felt like a great honour, and it meant that we, especially initially, we had that nest where we did feel safe and where we could just exist and be and not have to be trying to live up to anything. And that was a relief. That was a space where, we could take off all the masks and just exist. It was special.
And when it's met with care and acceptance, it's not just special, it's alluring when it's something that you haven't experienced before.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you explain to us the people that she connected you to through her, or the person? Not so much in terms of who he was publicly, but what his visibility and status meant to you at that age. We've talked about some of the things that are important to teenagers, and that this is a really important part of this story because that obviously shaped the dynamic between you.
Mm-hmm. So she laid the groundwork really well for him. It wasn't long before we were reading Jilly Cooper to her, often in her bed, and being party to conversations about sex, sexting, and phone sex, especially due to our history that all felt deeply uncomfortable, for which she laughed at us. And the message at that time was very clearly that if we didn't enjoy talking about and thinking about sex, then there was something wrong with us.
Which reinforced everything that you'd learned early in your life.
Exactly. And typing replies to work emails to improve my typing skills soon expanded to include typing replies to the sexual emails she was engaging with that friend, and to his text messages when we were with her in the car. And then it wasn't very long after that before he was including reference to us in those messages. And her comment on that was that having sex with him would be the best sex education we could have, but also that he wishes he could have sex with you because he was 4 times my age. He was very well known in the UK and was someone that we looked up to, as did our father. He had money and he had status, and our individual conversations with him began because she told us to email him, telling us that he was really good at listening and being supportive, which at the time she didn't want to engage with our feelings. So it was very much that my feelings were too much, and if I wanted to talk about them, then I would talk to him.
Do you think that was a conscious move on her part?
Not sure.
It just seems timely. Yeah.
Yeah. So those emails started with us opening our inner feelings, thoughts, and worries to him. We shared our poetry, which he read and commented on and was complimentary to. We felt honoured to be seen by him and to have someone asking about how we really felt about things. You know, I think the focus of a groomer as they learn about you is relentless and it's intoxicating. And it's a focus that doesn't happen anywhere else because it's not healthy, because people should have their own lives. But when a groomer is focused on you, like, it's all about you.
You just saying before about, connecting with the woman previously, and everything that you did was based on her interests and her needs. And then this shift to him making everything about you, everything about how you feel, what you love, where you feel safe.
Yeah.
I don't know, especially at that age, because one, you don't see it as a
No.
teenager.
You do and you don't. Like,
Yeah, so where did that sit for you? Prior to the escalation, when he was making everything about you, was there parts that felt uncomfortable?
no.
Mm.
No. It felt good to start with. I mean, there was a level of uncomfortable about the messages that they were exchanging and the nature of those. But in the very beginning, it just felt like being seen. It didn't feel, I don't know. It's complicated. Like,
Yeah,
it felt good, but it felt
yeah.
uncomfortable too.
The red flags in the beginning weren't there for you. They might have been there for his behaviour towards the other woman, but at that point in time, he was doing everything that he could to gain your trust and respect and admiration.
Exactly.
So as that communication between the two of you became more private and more directed by him, how did that start to erode your sense of choice and safety and agency within the dynamic that was forming?
So the emails quickly moved on to AOL Messenger, which was a bit that's the thing of living in the last kind of 4 decades. Everything changed very fast. So AOL Messenger was a bit like Discord, but also chat room adjacent. So messages disappeared at the end of the conversation, so it was less traceable. Once over there, the conversations quickly became increasingly sexual in their focus. Perhaps the most twisted thing he did around that time was to take us through a safe space visualization, which he would have known from hypnotherapy and NLP, that he then inserted himself into as the place to imagine us having sex. We still can't do, like, we do safe space visualizations, but we can't think of them with that name because it's just too hard. And then those conversations lasted about a year and became increasingly involved. He would ask what we were wearing, tell me what he was doing, and he told us what to do. We felt ill throughout all of those conversations, and we used to dread him coming online. We would have avoided AOL Messenger altogether, but we used it because one of our close friends from school didn't have access to MSN, which was the Microsoft version. And although we did not do what he instructed us to do, we would sit full of dread and type yes. And yes, we enjoyed it because we were afraid of making him angry. Because we were scared that if we angered him, he would tell her what had been happening and that she would be jealous or furious or think we were stupid, which she contributed to by, and now we wonder how much they spoke to each other in that time about it, because the day after he asked for a photo, she said that we shouldn't send one because if he asked for one, because he would Photoshop it onto a naked body and use it as porn, and that women needed to manage a man's expectations. At which point we had already sent the photo, so that comment made us feel disgusting, stupid, and responsible for his behaviour towards us. After that, he began to phone us when we were alone at her house, having long sexual conversations with us into the night. He also sent us a webcam with documents making it look like we'd won a competition, which thankfully our aged computer was not compatible with, for which we are ever grateful.
Had you talked to him about how important safe spaces were to you before he presented that back to you?
Honestly, I don't remember. We'd definitely spoken about the bullying and about hiding in like places where we did feel safe. So in that way, we sort of had, yeah.
That part of your experience, Kat, just tears at me at how he eroded your capacity for safety when it was something that you had fought for your entire life.
It was very skillfully done. All of it was.
During that time, what are the aspects that make it impossible to speak up or ask for help as the situation becomes more and more confronting?
We felt totally disgusting to be included in those conversations and to know the things they were both sharing with us. But we also felt chosen and mature. Although we hated all of it, We were also around other teenagers at school who talked about their desire to experience all things sexual. So it was a very confusing mix of having access to something others desired and also feeling deeply ashamed to be tainted by it. We felt that our peers would find it disgusting to be talking about sex with him being so much older, and because of how graphic it was, we felt that our parents would think we were stupid and should have known better and should have realised it was grooming sooner. And that was reinforced by comments that they made about girls who were in the news at the time.
I think about us growing up, and I don't know if it's the same in Scotland, but we did a lot of programs through school about, now they call it consent, but back then it was, my body's nobody's body but mine, and all of these things are introduced to us here at a young age, but no one talks about grooming. They talk about touching, they talk about inappropriate behaviour, they talk about protecting your own space, but nobody talks about grooming.
Mm. That's really good that they do that, at least there. We didn't even have that. We literally had one video about like how sex works, which we were left to watch on our own as a class, and most people just talked through it, didn't bother. There wasn't a lot of that. I think there's more now, but we didn't really get any guidance about that. There was nothing about consent yet. It was all just biological.
I was just listening to you speak about the pull between what is age appropriate curiosity and the feelings of actually living through what you were. It struck me in that moment that as a young person, how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know that this person who, in every other sense of the word, is being kind and generous and warm and sometimes loving, but there's just this one really tough aspect that you don't know how to deal with? How are we supposed to know that's wrong?
It's really hard. I think looking back, the fact that it's uncomfortable should be enough for it to be wrong. If young people know that they have a right to not feel uncomfortable, then that is helpful, because I think more people are trained to expect the big obvious things, and that creates a massive grey area where there's a lot of things that are not, stranger danger and all that was around, but are also really, really not okay.
Yeah.
And there should be a space to talk about that. And people should have, children should have safe adults that they feel they can talk to. That's really important.
Yeah. What kind of power did he hold over you during that time?
Even though it was really confusing, we were aware that if we told a teacher, they would have to tell the police and possibly child services. And we were terrified of losing all of the things that made us feel valued alongside all of the abuse they brought with them. We felt really trapped between his relentless attention and the fear of her jealousy or disgust. And our parents' disgust too. So it built a place where the only two adults that we felt safe with were both making it impossible to talk to the other about them because they were so tight with each other. And like the fear of her being disgusted or angry about how it was progressing was reinforced one day when he called for me while she was home. That's the only time that happened. And she like almost threw the phone at us and shouted like, he wants to speak to you. Like it was ridiculous that he wanted to speak to us. And like we just went and shut the door to our bedroom and like curled up on the bed and cried while he like did stuff down the phone. It was kind of all encompassing. Like, it was impossible. It was just impossible to talk about. And
Mm.
I think he knew that. I think he built that situation so that it was impossible to talk about. And I look back and, we can see, looking back, all of the tests that were made. Like the first time he spoke about, what are you wearing? What colour's your underwear? And we didn't stop talking to him. Or, the first time he referred to us in those messages with her. Or that when he sent the webcam, and we didn't tell our parents, like the tests were there to keep him safe by making sure that we were and would stay silent.
You said a second ago, I think he might have done that to test me, or I'm 100% fucking positive that he did that, Kat.
Yeah.
If you put his actions into the playbook, and I can't help but draw the comparison between the relationship between these two people and another relationship that has been in our news a whole ton very recently.
Yeah.
As an adult looking at this, you can see the orchestration, but as a kid, you've
Yeah.
got no way of knowing.
No, because as much as we already found it really difficult to trust people, like a vast minority of people had actually cared for us and felt safe. But still, as a child, you expect adults to be safe. And there's that need there. And then you don't think about the consequences because it's not something that's on your radar until it happens.
As a child, you expect adults to be safe. As a child, we should be able to trust the adults in our life to be safe. That is the natural order of things, and the fact that we live in a world where so often it's not. It's not just alarming, it's the reasons why we need to have these conversations, because without understanding what this looks like or feels like for someone, I don't know that other people will ever be able to understand how these people infiltrate and isolate their victims. What was that isolation like for you in that time? Like, it had been something that had existed through your life, but as it escalated, like, did that compound that sense of isolation?
Yeah, it felt like not existing. It felt like being trapped in a body that everyone wanted. And by that time, our inner feelings were again inconvenient to both of them. She actually found my poems once, safely stowed in our dresser drawer at her house, and she threw them out and said they were too depressing and we needed to focus on good things before we fell into a hole. And we very quietly dumpster dived to get them back, and that's why we still have them now. That's why they're now in a book, because even then, like, I guess we valued our inner feelings. And we'd shown her them after entering the first poem, which is called I Once Saw a Person Dead and is about us. So I think that that is another window into how we were feeling. We entered it into a competition and were told at school that although it was very good, it was too dark to be included. We had a deep sense of not being good enough, or of not feeling the right things, of being defective to not enjoy what was happening, and also disgusting to be a part of what was happening to us. I felt really lonely,
Mm.
and it was constant. We couldn't get away from it because every time someone at school mentioned sex, then the triggers would be there. And it was just always there, like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, if there's something that somebody's dreading, like, I don't know, like a presentation or something, like, and it's really frightening, but it was just that every day. And that's a lot to hold.
It is a whole ton to hold. That dread that you mentioned there, up until this point, everything had been via phone, online messaging. But then there was a point that you knew he was coming to see you. What was it like for you living inside that waiting, knowing that very likely something terrible was approaching and feeling completely unable to stop it?
That happened after about a year and a half of grooming, at a time when we were house sitting for 2 months alone in her house. And he knew that because they talked about her being away. So in the first week of that time, he announced in an email that we should have a pajama party. And as that made me feel really ill, but as usual, we just replied like, haha, and didn't really take it seriously. But then a few days after that, he called us while we were at school to say he would be there in 6 hours. And I couldn't say anything, like literally couldn't say anything. And he just said that and then hung up. And remember my friends asking who it was, and we just said it was him and didn't say anything else, and just finished that day of school because we didn't feel like we could tell them. On the bus home, we exchanged messages with him because he messaged that it has to be our little secret. And we had a whole exchange of messages saying, I said if it was okay, then it wouldn't need to be a secret. And we were just trying to, I guess, make him rethink what he was doing. But he had an answer for everything that we said. So by the time we got home, we definitely felt that there was nothing more we could say. Like, there was no intellectual arguments that we could think of that were going to get us out of that situation. But there was also a lot of disbelief and dread. It's a type of scared and frozen that few people understand. We just felt like we were going through the motions and everything felt inevitable. We felt totally powerless and like we almost like we were watching ourselves, but then also weirdly practical. Things like took off all our jewellery and we put our hair in a ponytail so it would go as smoothly and as quickly as possible. But on the other side of that, though, we also put on our most childish pyjamas in the hope that it would put him off if we looked younger. Although looking back, that was probably faulty logic. He kept calling with updates on how far away he was, and after we'd done all the essential things, we just lay on the sofa and couldn't move. And we just lay there with like tears streaming down our face. We felt incredibly alone and like it was our fault because there must have been something that we should have done to not lead him to this outcome. And actually, of course, all the responsibility is on him because he chose to groom and rape a child, but it would be a long time before we felt the truth of that. At the time, we felt so stupid and useless and alone. Like, we really wanted to tell that first mentor, but by that time, we hadn't seen them for a while, and we were just scared that they would turn us away, and then that would be another pain to hold, and we just didn't have capacity to hold any more terror than we were already holding. And then eventually he called to say to leave the door open for him, which we did, and he parked down the road and walked up so that no one would see a car at the house. It was all very well thought out.
As an adult now, looking back at that time, are you able to talk about it without that fear and shame still infiltrating your body? Or does that still show up every time you talk or think about it?
Recently, because it has taken a lot of time and a lot of work. Recently, the shame has shifted, but that dread, when we talk about it, is still there. That's just deeply wired into all of what we are.
I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. It is such a difficult thing when you are programmed, and I'm going to call it that because that's what grooming is. It is programming a person.
Yeah. It's training. I think our therapist said to us once that people that haven't experienced it don't have a clue, and they won't. And she was like, you don't have to explain it because you didn't have a choice. Like, you go to a place where you don't have a choice and you just do what you're told to survive. And it's true.
It is 100% true. I imagine that there are people who listened to that part of your story and felt that in their body the same way that I did. And that there will be people looking at it logically and saying, well, why didn't you run? Why didn't you lock the door?
Those thought processes were there, that we've said about wanting to tell that mentor, that previous mentor. We thought about going to our parents' house, but then it was a Tuesday and that would have been strange and they would have wanted to know why. And we just felt far too ashamed to tell them. And we knew that we couldn't mask how awful we were feeling. We thought, if we locked the door, then he might break a window, and then we'd have to explain that to her, and then she would find out what had been going on. And we felt like if we locked the door or we weren't there, like, he might wait until the morning and then he would be more angry and it would be worse, and we would have to miss school, and then people would find out what had been happening. So the shame is a big piece of that.
And on top of all of those things, you had been programmed to do whatever he said.
Exactly.
I just want to make that really clear for anybody who is thinking about this in a logical sense. This is systematic, intentional behavioural modification that happens over a long period of time. And it happens to a child.
I mean, I think grooming is very difficult for anyone to resist. And, if you did, then they just move on to someone else. But especially children who haven't had that kind of space holding, I guess, modelled or allowed. You just don't have the playbook for arguing that, or, we had no sense that we were allowed to decide what happened to our body. And we were very used to what people wanted to do to our body mattering more than how we felt about it.
How does this experience still show up in your life all of these years later?
It's it's always been there. It's grown, after he left. We went into the bathroom and showered as hot and then as cold as we could bear it, because we wanted to hurt and matter and exist. And we wanted to be seen as a person, not an object. And the most shocking thing at that point was that we looked exactly the same, as if nothing had happened in the mirror. We were in so much pain, mentally and physically, and we realised that no one else would be able to see it. And the next day we went to school as if nothing had happened, and that feeling of just going through the motions lasted for years. The only person that actually noticed anything was our physics teacher, who commented that we'd been reading the same page for over half an hour and then brought us tea and cake and asked us what was wrong. And we couldn't say anything, although we really wanted to. It was the same thing, just couldn't, just completely frozen and dread and shame and couldn't speak. But that feeling seen, that little bit of care and recognition that was unconditional, was so precious. Actually, years later, we let her know what had happened and expressed our gratitude for it, and now we're friends. But apart from that exchange, no one else in our daily life noticed or commented that there was anything wrong, apart from, so it was near Christmas when it happened, and we had prepared her house for Christmas, and then her brother and his wife came to visit, and we were in the kitchen making mince pies and just crying, because whenever we weren't in front of anyone, we cried. It was that thing when, like, the mask is on and we're fine, everything is okay. But as soon as we weren't in front of someone, just sobbing. And her sister-in-law came in and sort of said, what's wrong? And she followed her and very forcefully just said, she's just being a stupid teenager, and sent me outside. Yeah, it just wasn't anything that we felt we could share. And day by day, somehow, we lived on within our body, which felt like it belonged to him, which felt like a house that had burned down with us hiding in the garden. We don't have as many full body flashbacks as we used to, and we don't get stuck in them for hours like we used to. It's called flop. It's like the end zone of freeze, where it's like the rabbit in the fox's mouth who goes limp and then runs away when the fox puts them down. And we used to just be stuck and we couldn't move, and that flashback would go round and round, sometimes for hours, until we came out of that. And while we don't get stuck in them anymore, instead they come in short flashes that we can catch and remind ourselves that they are not happening now, and that now time is safe. They come as painful body memories, as audible flashbacks that are like him speaking in our ear, as spikes of fear and dread, as the feeling of suffocating and worrying that we would die. The past is ever present for us. And a lot of our day is spent soothing and reparenting ourselves, in being the calm and safe adult presence that we didn't have as a child. And being responsible for that care is completely unfair. And the knowledge that we will never have that safe person to land with that we should have had brings with it a lot of grief. but that is the truth of surviving. We are working every second of every day to manage the aftermath of our experiences, to be authentic, to hold our brokenness and our brilliance together, to honour the pain and also the joy in the life that we are building now.
Your brokenness and your brilliance. To see you in the world supporting other people and sharing your experiences to help others in the way that you didn't have someone to help you is such an inspiring thing to me, Kat. I think you are truly an extraordinary human. What do you wish people understood?
How organised it is and how helpless you are once it has progressed, because it is strategically built. They are choosing to do what they're doing. But because you're not actually responsible, you can't work out what you did to make it happen. But the feeling of being responsible for something that you don't understand, I'm sure it would be hard for anybody, but especially for children, is just so confusing.
If someone who is listening hears parts of themselves in your story, what would you want them to know right now?
We would want them to know that nothing that is or was done to them is their fault. It is always the fault of the abuser, and it is always their decision to abuse. And like we were saying, nothing that you did or did not do made them abuse you. There is no shame in the things that other people choose to do to you. And there can be joy after, even though it is really hard to live in the aftermath, and that maybe never goes away. But there is a community of survivors who will understand how difficult it is and who are so caring. Peer support is wonderful, so seek that out where you can. But also there are organisations who specialise in sexual violence and in childhood sexual abuse, and they often have a helpline. Find those people, because you will need them. It's not something you can hold alone. The rape crisis helpline in the UK has saved our life more times than we can count. If you cannot speak to people around you, find community online. And if you're not ready to speak yet, know that many of us take years to reach that point. Grooming is designed to build beliefs that speaking out is dangerous, and that is part of it, so it makes sense. We told no one for 2 years, which we remember very little of, and it would be 4 more years before we spoke anything more than my first time wasn't something that I wanted. The community will be here when you're ready. Read people's stories if you can without being overwhelmed. Just knowing that there are people who feel the same is helpful. You didn't deserve anything that was done. It's not your fault.
Before we wrap up, I just want to say a really heartfelt thank you to Kat. Thank you for the care, the honesty, and the generosity you have brought into this space. Sharing lived experience like this isn't easy, and I'm so grateful for your bravery and your trust in us and our listeners. If you're listening and this has brought anything up for you, please go gently with yourself. It's okay to reach out. You don't have to carry any of this on your own. 24/7 free support is available in Australia through 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or Lifeline on 13 11 14. Our international listeners can find support services in their areas via the No More Global Directory at nomoredirectory.org. If you would like to connect with Kat, you can find them through Willow Birch Supportive Coaching at willowbirch.co.uk or over on Instagram at Gratitude and Truth. As always, you'll be able to find the links to these services and to Kat in our show notes at ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. Please take care of yourselves. Be kind to your nervous systems if you have been able to make it all the way through this conversation. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next week for something a little lighter.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If These Trees Could Talk and What Would They Say are productions of Bellevue Studio. Our host is Shannon Walters, executive and audio production by Megan Anderson, with socials and marketing managed by Mia Oberdorf. We always appreciate hearing your thoughts, so if you would like to support the show, you can rate, review and subscribe. To stay up to date between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. For more information on this episode or to connect with our guests, you'll find everything you need to know in the show notes at ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. We're grateful to have you with us, and we look forward to sharing what comes next. Thanks for being here.